I'm Eric Philpott. I'm currently working on a documentary film. It's my first feature-length film and the second, I guess, major artistic project I've undertaken in my life. Um, so, and I guess I'm interested in particular in the creative process where we get ideas, how we develop them, and then that incredibly exciting process of shaping and crafting art um, once we have the idea, once we've started on it. Um, I don't know if I should say more about the film, but why don't we just keep going and we can come back to our different projects.
All right.
Mark, why don't you go next, Mark?
All right. Thanks. I am called the godfather of storyboarding. I'll actually share something real quick just as we're talking. Some samples of my storyboards from Stranger Things here. I have been in the entertainment industry now for about 37 years, something like that. I actually got my start as an art director at Roger Corman's studio, for those of us old enough to know the king of B-budget movies. I was hired as construction coordinator and became the art director 2 weeks later. And I did that for a number of years, but I missed drawing. So I slowly started working my way in at HBO into doing, I was working on First and 10 with O.J. Simpson. I started doing storyboards there and then went full-time storyboarding with Spielberg on the old sci-fi series Sequest, if you remember that on NBC back in the early 90s. And I've been full-time storyboarding since, in addition to producing a lot of animation. But yeah, I do mostly live action. I've done over 6,000 productions now of all types, whether it's games, videos, TV series, feature films, you name it. A lot of commercials, obviously. I also wrote 13 books on the industry, including the Bible of storyboarding called Storyboards, Motion, and Art. And I produced all the storyboarding courses on LinkedIn Learning. I helped develop the main software called Storyboard Pro. I've written hundreds of articles for Animation Magazine and Cinefex and Movie Maker and whatnot. So I'm kind of a geek on visual storytelling. It's why I love what I do. I just get to draw and work with really great directors every single day. So it's a blast. So Kerry, Michelle, fill us in a little bit on you.
I hadn't realized how much shared history we had, Mark. Really.
Awesome.
I started off working in Xerox, believe it or not. It was one of my first summer jobs on a little project called Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
So we have friends in common.
Very many, but those friends probably know me before I transitioned. So, but there are a few that I've started introducing to myself to. So, so if you know Pete Bishop's met Kerry. Tony White's met Kerry now.
Yeah, Tony's awesome.
Oh yes. Don Bluth's met Kerry. So yeah, it's funny. Like I've had a very rich career, everybody. So I never turned down a job, and that would be from exec producing a HBO feature film to day playing on Stranger Things as a sound utility in the middle of the desert, blowing things up on season 4, to
Nice.
day playing on an A24 film in Crafty. I never turn anything down. And it's quite often funny that people will see me, especially on Love Lies Bleeding, the producer of that, I was doing second meal and he was like, Kerry, what are you doing second meal? I said, because why not? And he goes, but you wrote referral, you wrote references for people on set and you're doing Crafty. And I said, yeah, but isn't it fun? So, so yeah, part of my story is I was a major studio when I transitioned. I created a bit of a problem. Basically months living out of my car, sofa surfing, and I finally crawled back up to the point. I'd like to say to everybody, I said earlier on, there's going to be an announcement in the trades soon, if not next week, the week after, where I'm actually taking a major managerial position in Northern Ireland. So games, interactive, virtual volumetric stages will come under my remit. So watch this space.
Wow.
But I'm happy to chat with you guys about anything today.
Well, that's really exciting. I mean, it's this new technology that we're able to take advantage of. It's changing how we develop, like the visual, especially when you're working in a volume, because now so much of the post-viz has to happen in pre-viz so that it can be real time up on the screen. It's fascinating.
Oh, it is, but I will say that I was always I would no, I can say now say I was always the queen of previs, and when I was working at Passion Pictures, conforming and delivering commercials, pop promos, and features for them, we had this thing called pre-post, where we'd only go and clock a commercial in Flame or in Flame or Harry, just so the client could sit there and drink Chianti and have sushi. They did nothing in there. All right. Everything else was done at my desk. And yeah, we called it pre-post. But effectively, what Passion taught me was you could never have enough prep. You could never have enough ideas as formalized as possible. So if there were surprises on set, you knew how to handle them, and we had every option covered. And that was so beautiful to work with those guys.
Yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to suggest that we could kind of structure our conversation like sequentially through the creative process. So let me try this on you.
Sure.
I'm curious where the creative process begins. So Mark, for example, with a storyboard, potentially you could theoretically be coming up with a story yourself. But I think, that's an angle of where the creative process could begin. Like, I'd love to hear that. And Kerry, Michelle, same thing. Now, I think a lot of your work has actually been editing, right? Which means, is that correct?
Well, yeah, I'll talk to it. It's pre-production, production, editing, post-production, delivery.
So then there may actually be different answers to this, but I'm still curious, picking whichever hat you prefer, or even sort of holistically, again,
I'll talk
yourself,
where
the creative process begins. I just think it'd be interesting. We could kind of see if we can kind of look at the steps in the journey. And this would be the first question for that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll let Mark talk about his arena and then I'll fill in either side. How's that?
Well, for me, I mean, the first thing is, regardless of what kind of production I'm on, they send me a script. So I read through the script a few times. I always start with reading it once just for enjoyment, kind of get a feel for it, so I know kind of what to expect. Then I read it again, thinking about where are the stunts, effects, and the things that are obviously in there that I'll probably have to storyboard. Because in live action, we only do stunts, effects, one-ers, camera moves, and transitions. We don't do the whole thing unless it's a giant Marvel movie. And then I sit with the director, because I'm not the one creating the shots. Some story artists work that way, but I think they fail when they do that. Our job is to create the director's vision and illustrate it, and then plus it and enhance it. But every director I work with knows exactly what they want. And if I didn't capture it, it's a waste of my time and theirs. So my goal is always to get their vision down exactly. So I actually developed a process years ago where using virtual technologies like we're doing right now, I'll share my screen as I'm drawing, and I'll thumbnail out as they're describing each and every shot. And so I get approvals by the time we're done with our first phone call. So instead of this whole back and forth, which frustrates directors, I want to be more efficient. I want to get their vision on my first try, and I do every time. Doesn't mean there aren't changes, because there's always, you lose a location, or there's a new idea, or the budget changes, and all of a sudden the 10 shots that we had ILM doing of our tiger that we had in Snowfall all of a sudden became just 5 shots. And then they liked it so much they ended up going back to the 10. That kind of nonsense that you go back and forth. So it starts with a script, and then it's me and the director digging into it and just having a creative powwow.
And you're already creating in the conversation with the director.
You're in real time,
starting to shape things. That's brilliant.
I'm literally sketching in real time. And because the software that I use, which I also helped develop, the Storyboard Pro software, I'm actually putting in camera moves and layer moves in real time. So there's a rough animatic at the end of our first conversation. I mean, it's phenomenal what we're able to do now. And then I add in all the notes and clean it up and make it more acceptable, easier for everyone to understand for production. So yeah, it's fun. And on some projects, we end up also doing post-viz storyboards. If there's missing shots, or for instance, on Walking Dead in the 10th season, we had a sequence where we had Michonne was drugged and was dreaming that she had joined Negan. And so we used footage from season 5 when Negan beat in the head of a few of the characters with a bat. Well, we didn't have all those actors, so we needed to use the actual footage. So they brought out the season 5 footage, and then I worked with the editor, producer, and director. I edited the video in my storyboard software, and then I drew over the video of the blue screen elements that we needed to add in. So we were post-viz directing. So by the time we got done, everyone could see it. Editorial just put in my storyboards, which had all their underlying footage anyway, into their edit. So they were actually able to put it together while they were still shooting. And then just they dropped in the new shots as they got it. So the process, because the software we have now is changed a lot, and we can offer a lot more.
That's cool. Kerry, Michelle?
Okay, so I'd like to talk to that, Mark. So we didn't have your software back in the day. So
well, I started on paper too, so I've been through the whole thing.
Yeah. So I was the queen of line tests and really bad Photoshop cutout and awful After Effects comps. So effectively, I given the opportunity, depending on the project, I would often be involved in the pre-production stage, either as a technical producer, be it one example would be when we did the first ever live Gorillaz performance at the MTV Awards. I was actually brought in really early in the process to talk to how, and when we came to deliver it, how were we going to deliver and synchronize 5 HD streams across 5 plasma screens to a music track with dancers. It had never been done before. Right. So I came in an early stage to say, okay, we can potentially do the X, Y, and Z. And then while they were, Phil Dale was storyboarding it and working in CG, we were actually producing animatics and Leicas to get buy-in and acceptance from the record company, from MTV, from the creatives themselves. It's a whole thing. So, for me, getting a technical producer or at least someone from editorial involved from the word go, just because if you're doing something that is going to push the envelope, and especially in the fact that you're doing something that's never been done before or never been done to scale before, is pretty much where I step in. It's where I like to step in. But I am also, to want of a better word, often a mushroom. So I'm left in a dark, dank place, not knowing what's going on, and every now and again someone will throw a bucket of shit over me and see what blossoms, So there is all of that. But effectively, throughout the process, when I'm involved in things, is I will take line tests, cut those against it, take any Leica work. Then, if the director, who, I was very fortunate, I'd often sit with the directors and the animators, and we would just hash stuff out and see where things would go. And we would often reiterate, depending on where the budget and the time was going. We were very rapid. But yes, as you said, you were dropping in across live action. We would drop little drawing bits in, they'd move it around. I'd move it around, I'd animate it across a number of frames, and just say, okay, then is this the kind of thing? Are we going to get buy-in for an additional shot on this or not? And they take the work, the rough work that we did to get additional buy-in. There is also another side of that. Sony PlayStation 2, the other place. There are some beautiful line test animations on that started off as Dan Summage and Russell Brook doodling on napkins over lunch, and they would actually draw on my edit desk. I had a beautiful white desk, and they would do little noodly drawings, and we'd take pictures of it. These essentially low rent, barely animated things became the campaign. And Sony was so proud of them. There was one called Robot, which is just a robot doing a cycle move. dancing to a track. There's another one called Laughing, which are these stick characters that stand there and they just pick up an animated smile and drop it down. Really, really low rent, you know, but so effective. And it was just the fact that we sat there and we just cut it together. They came back with these things, we scanned it, we cut it together, we put it on, and then they were like, oh yeah, we're buying this. You mean we can do more than one commercial? We can do 5. And it's that joy of being dynamic and fluid, you know, taking what was our storyboards, making them the Leicas, and then the final product, you know.
So Eric, you're doing a documentary, which there's any number of different ways that the creative comes up to start on something like that. So what was your inspiration? How did this start for you?
I'll say something, but I want to make a quick comment on what you both were sharing that I so strongly can relate to the importance of the sooner you can get the thing shaped, visualized, the sooner you've got a consensus in the creative process. So I really appreciate what you're both describing about this importance of getting the idea as far ahead as soon as possible so that there's clarity about what we're going to make here in the film or the commercial or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and also remember, that it's not set in stone. We are flexible. It's just a guide. It's not the be all and end all, especially in documentaries. I'll let you talk and then I'll tell you about my documentary experience.
Oh, cool. I got a question about your doc, or at least one of them. But yeah, so for me, I think I'm going to take a different tack from what you're describing. I really believe in opportunism. Which is to say that I really believe that stories are all around me. Now, I'm going to be talking here in the role of a kind of a writer-director type, but that's generally probably been even in my marketing type of stuff, that's still the type of position I would have normally. And I do believe in this quite deeply. So I'll give you this example. I just think there are stories all around. They're just all waiting just to be picked up, and there's just gold all around us. In this particular case, I would say this kind of fell into my lap. There's a family story we had about a job that my late father he'd been an engineer on a project, on a construction project in Dresden, Ontario, in Canada here. And the story was that he had been concerned about the safety of the excavation, that the contractor had, and he was like 25 years old and fresh off the boat from Britain and all that. And the contractor had sort of said, like, don't worry, kid, we know what we're doing. And then there was a cave in and 6 men were killed. And as the story goes, my dad was sort of shocked that there was no consequence for this contractor. He seemed to be too popular in the community, according to what my mother told me. And so here's her family story. And I thought, oh, wow, that sounds kind of serious. And I thought a few years ago was looking for anything on it. I couldn't find anything about it. So I just assumed, well, maybe the story just, something changed, lost in translation. 1957 is 66 years ago. Some details could get lost. And then a few years ago, my mother found his diary from the project and a photo album from the project and letters and court testimony that he delivered in the trial. And it was like, oh my God, all of this actually happened. And at the time, it was during the pandemic. I couldn't really do anything about it at that moment, but it's something I've been really wanting to do. Since then, I've found the family members of the survivors. They were all Dutch immigrant workers. So there's a whole worker immigrant story. And one thing really leads to another. And also, once you've kind of got the initiative or the drive around an idea, like this story must be told. And one of the mysteries about it is how the story just has vanished. It's just truly vanished. There are other stories that are less significant. I know construction accidents aren't necessarily the highest of drama in the scheme of things, but it's still a sort of peculiar the way this particular one has vanished. And I'm rushing on this. I want to hurry because the people who are affected are like 70 and sometimes 80 and even 90 years old. But it's amazing how the story just comes together. And I could think of a good half dozen others that are like that are just, when I get to it, I'm going to start digging. And I just think that rather than trying to reach too far or look too far, that often the best ideas are really just right there. So I think I'm going to say opportunism is what I really believe in the creative process, that there are, when something falls in your lap, go for it.
Yeah, and especially you're kind of ahead of the game because you know what your story arcs already. Okay, you virtually have your acts laid out.
That's right.
And as a documentary editor and conformer, the way I'd suggest you going forward is, if you've got stills, is like, kind of like storyboard, is to actually narrate the key points that you want and slot them in a
Exactly.
sequence and see how it gels. And then you know what to
Exactly.
shoot from there, and you get inspiration on that and follow other routes to go through. But that's sort of where I'd go along, so sort of piecing it together.
I quite agree with that. And I'm doing the storyboard essentially as a narrative, as if it was all narrated, and maybe it will be narrated. That's to be determined. But as I do this, and this is what I've done for my years of creating marketing videos also, like the script and the visuals, the more you imagine it, just like you guys were describing, the more clearly you imagine it in the beginning, the more efficiently you can execute. And anything can change, but having a really good and thoroughly thought out map, you're up and running. And you can change as, the material shows you what needs to be adjusted and tweaked. So,
and
yeah.
also be open to those happy accidents of something that pops up that you didn't expect.
Yeah,
the
more you have it put together, the easier it is to make adjustments and changes, as long as you're open to it.
Exactly.
Like a director who's got a shot list, everyone knows what they're doing going in, but all of a sudden there's a really key element that you want to showcase or shoot through when you're on the set. It's easy to make the changes if everyone's not, barely hanging on. The more organized you are, the easier it is to make changes. So
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Yeah. Okay, so I got another question for you guys to keep it rolling here. I'm pretty struck, especially in the world of film. I mean, a film is a symphony, right? It's a combination of so many art forms, but also a combination of so many people. I do feel that that's actually one of the beauties of this art form, that it's really a team project.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious what your, I guess, Mark, you're up next. Then, how do you what does that mean to you, the teamwork aspect? And do you try to help build that or nurture that quality of kind of a collaborative experience in creating?
Well, the team I work with is the director, the DP, and the stunt coordinator. Usually, those are the three that I'm usually interacting with, and I love it. Sometimes it's a puzzle to figure out. Other times it's taking, the director will often have a different way of telling a story than I ever would have imagined, and so it's an exciting route to go through. And then we work together to help achieve that dream. I love doing that. I mean, look, I get plenty of time where I sit and draw what I want. Like, you're talking about your documentary. I wrote a memoir during the pandemic about when my family was attacked and a gang was trying to kill me. And what we went through on all of that. And so then I storyboarded sections of it, because it's more than just words. I have the visuals in my head of what we went through. So I have that where I'm doing of my own. But working with other people, I find expands my creativity on, a stunt coordinator, we need to hide this. We're going to have to do this. These are the parameters. Or the DP says, I want to use, this kind of crane or Russian arm, or what we call the Ukraine now, and let's do this with long lens and and shorten the perspective. I love all of that, and it's like, okay, so how can I show it and get across everything to everybody else? And what if we also did this and added this shot in? So we're bouncing off of each other. That builds the excitement of the visual storytelling, kind of like a bunch of musicians sitting around jamming. Each one inspires the next. That's how I look at the kind of art that I'm doing on creating the visuals that we're going to excite the viewing audience.
Yeah, cool. Kerry, Michelle, what about you?
Oh, well, as I alluded to earlier on, I never turned down a gig because one, people go, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "I will always learn something. I will always learn something new. And two, I'm a collector of stories, and I love being around creatives because I like to collect their stories. So one of the things, although conforming editing and delivery is a very solitary job, I have been told that I have a beautiful bedside manner. So when the producers and the directors come in, when I was conforming documentaries and they're missing stuff, I could tell them that they were screwed without making them feel as though they were screwed, because I would just put it very calmly, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, we're pretty screwed right now, but I will make it look beautiful, and I would do that. But for me, if I'm involved in the production process earlier, and especially on short form work, I'm actually sitting with the director a lot, or the director and producer team. It's funny. I love the camaraderie, and I love the thing. I'm not a creative. I'm a technical creative. I'm given an issue to deal with. I'm given a reason to move forward, or if they've got a bottleneck, I move it forward in a different way. Now, in that, working with those teams, I often felt like a marriage guidance counselor in the edit suite. You'd have two people having like a domestic behind you, and it was, but that was generally, they'd be so focused on what was happening on the screen, and then they'd have an argument, and they'd come back refreshed to what was on the screen. And that whole dynamic of picking up and understanding where they're going. When I was editing with Danny Boyle, he came into Passion Pictures, and it was a big deal. And he got to work with me, and I started working. And on the first day, him and Alex sat around, and then on the second day, Danny Boyle came in, chatted with me, and then left. And the assistant producer comes running in and goes, "What's happened? Have you upset Danny?" And I'm like, "No." I said, "He just wants to take some folks out for lunch." And they said, "What did he say to you?" And he said, "I like what you're doing. Keep doing that, and I'll be back later." And they went, "Was that a problem?" I said, "No, I'm doing my job. He's directed me. I'm editing. It's broad brushstrokes. We'll get down to noodling later, but he wants to see what's coming." And it's that dynamism between departments. And also, as a producer, I really am a producer, but I think I'm a really good producer because I know what's happening at all stages. I don't make assumptions, but I'm also not afraid to ask questions like, if you need 5 days, tell me why you need 5 days. Don't bamboozle me with everything. Just tell me why 5 days, and I'll get you the money.
Yeah, really good. It's interesting, the different part of the process when I think you're talking really about the editor side of it, or the post-production side, when you refer to a bedside manner or marriage counselor, right? Because there you're kind of receiving and you kind of got what you got, and it will work as well as it will work, versus that front end where there's more of you got a
this
little
is
bit
what
more
we'd like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's all
I'm
unicorns.
curious.
It's all unicorns and rainbows in pre-production. It's more sort of eating a meal during production, and post-production is generally the indigestion and hangover.
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting, the difference between feature film pre-pro and TV pre-pro. In films, you've got a lot more time to experiment and really think. But in TV, if it's a 10-day shoot, you got 10 days of prep. So there's and we often don't have a script until day 3 or 4. So then we're down to 5 or 6 days that we actually have the written word to prep from. So we're usually down and dirty, banging stuff out as fast as we possibly can. Even with storyboarding, I'll look at our shooting schedule, and I'll storyboard the things that shoot earlier in the schedule rather than shooting in order or drawing in order of the script. We might shoot the last thing first. It just depends on what's available. So I have to be cautious of our shooting schedule. So I get those storyboards out first, so all the crew members can take advantage of that information to be more efficient in their work.
Well, and the other thing is often I can work. I will ask for a treatment or a synopsis as soon as possible, so I can get starting with what I want. Because I've been a line producer, I've been a UPM, so that I know that, okay, then, so if you're giving me this, if this is effects laden, for instance, you know, get me the treatment, get me the idea of what's going on, how many characters are in the scene. I don't need to hear the words, just generally what's the big broad brushstroke. Yes, I do need the words for timing, but just get me these other bits first so I can say yay or nay, or offer you solutions, or work with someone to get what it could potentially look like.
You know, and to that point, I like it when when I'm on location, is to go out and scout locations with the director, because then we can step through the action and potential action together. So when we do sit down and go over the shots, once everything is approved, we can be that much quicker. And I've got my own reference photos, and having been in an area, I know what the surroundings look like. It's very quick and easy for me to capture the vision if I've walked through it. And unfortunately, more and more productions have story artists working only virtually, which has its benefits, but walking a location with a director is invaluable.
Oh yeah, and I'd like to talk to another element of walking locations with a director and being out on scouts with people is, you know, I'm also a sound utility. I do a lot of sound utility and boom work, and I've often subbed for my my production mixer, or you know, just walking with the production mixer going, oh my God, did they not realize we're right on top of the 101 here? Do they not realize we're in a flight path where there's a flight school running circuits every 90 seconds on a Tuesday? And they don't generally think about these things. Yeah, it may look visually stunning, but you have to come up with other solutions. Like, you will, unless you've got a huge budget for ADR, this is not going to work because we can't switch off the building site next door, you know? So there are a variety of different things. You know, it can look stunning, but it can sound pretty bad, you know, and vice versa. So, you know, being involved with that, and also again on documentaries, planning where you're going to do pickups, you know, and actual interviews with people. Yeah, you might want to be by the fallen down building site or hole in the ground, but acoustically, it's a dangerous place to be. Audio is, and you're not going to get what you need.
I have a funny story. 2 weekends ago, I was in Holland actually interviewing one of the people for this film. So one of the families, or one of the widows in this story, actually moved back to Holland. And by happy coincidence, I was going to Holland, and I located this guy. He wanted to do the interview in the cemetery where his mother's buried, which was a beautiful location. It happened to be the day where the Dutch fastidiously celebrate the failed, you know, the book A Bridge Too Far in World War II, or Market Garden.
Arnhem.
They have it in Arnhem, exactly. And they have this enormous reenactment with World War II planes flying over, parachutes, hundreds of military vehicles drop. Now, I didn't see the vehicles, but I did have the planes going over while I'm trying to do the interview. And planes are annoying anyway if you're doing an interview outdoors, which is one reason actually I hate doing interviews outdoors if I can help it. But you never think about it until it happens. World War II planes are incredibly loud and incredibly slow, way slower than all the planes nowadays. So just and it just, anyway, it did work out. But yeah, an example of location. Kerry, Michelle, I wanted to ask you about a film that I recently really enjoyed, and I think you were editing or doing some aspect of editorial on Navalny. And what I specifically, is that correct? What I specifically enjoyed about that film was the way it was, they were able to weave, they had very few interviews with Navalny himself, and yet made this whole thing kind of flow using all kinds of, like, even crappy, not just iPhone footage, but crappy old-fashioned cell footage. I thought that was amazing, by the way, the weaving together of all this material, and it felt whole. And unless you really thought about it, you wouldn't think, okay, they only interviewed Navalny this one time, and everything else is, or maybe twice. I could, you know, not often anyway. And they somehow, the director just wove all, or the editors wove that together so well. I'd love to hear about that.
Before you say that, I just want to interject and give a 5-minute warning. There's about 5 minutes left, but keep going. Okay. It's great. Fantastic.
Maybe at 3 minutes or any. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick potted thing on that. That film we had to do in absolute secrecy. Okay, so the editorial team were working remotely to me. I was conforming and deliveries on that for CNN So we were a small boutique, hidden. No one knew to know what we were doing. It had code names. We were operating everything on Signal. So I'd have Signal messages that would disappear. So if I didn't get the message quickly, I didn't know to do something. And we had servers that popped up and down because we could not be situated or seen in one particular place because we were suddenly people of interest. Very strong people of interest. And effectively, they worked with what they got. So, you know, yeah, obviously they had the interviews with Navalny and stuff like that. They had a thread that they wanted to work through. The aspects of working with the archival, we had to do so much post-processing on the archival, and some made it in and some didn't. And part of that was me trying to get the archival to work. I had a colleague who was doing transcodes from different frame rates and rasterizers. And there was a lot of it was like, this is as good as it's going to get. Or we can use this, but I need to blur this. And I was sitting there doing lots of blurs. You know, the colorist came and went. I was applying different bits of color. Sometimes we get an update to a bit of footage. It was logistically really difficult. The story itself was very simple and very beautiful, and they'd structured that. It was trying to fit everything in so that we could illustrate the story the best we could.
Incredible result.
And that was where it fell into my wheelhouse.
Yeah,
was
incredible result.
Trying to logistically work with them on that, manage that with them and everything, and not appear in public to be doing it. And we finally got caught out when we sent the translations and audio to be subbed for Sundance the day before. I did not insert the subs and get the full package out till the night before it was screened.
Wow,
amazing!
That's not the first time I've done that on a documentary feature. It's kind of what sat within my wheelhouse for a while, because I did 7 of the 11 Sundance documentaries this year. So,
wow.
Can we squeeze in one quick question, Mark? Can I ask you? I'm just curious. If you're the godfather of storyboarding, what on earth did people do before that? What did they do?
Well, storyboarding's been around since the 30s. I mean, you know, Disney started it actually on the Snow White movie. It's just that I'm so deeply involved in every aspect of it, and because I've written the most about it, and I've helping put so many things together and advance the technology of it. And because I'm in the press and on TV and stuff all the time talking about it, the press just started calling me the Godfather. So, you know, as a marketing thing for an individual, it's gold, and I love it. So I took it on.
So you didn't invent it, but you've defined it and shaped it.
Oh yeah. It was around long before I was, but I have had a hand in moving it forward into today with the new technologies, and hopefully I'll continue doing that.
Liberating us from the world of 3/4 inch and RM440s.
You know, I was so happy to move, just production in general, to move out of 3/4 inch and, you know, and 1 inch tapes and things like that. When we opened up Nickelodeon and we went to the 1 inch and then started playing with high def back in, I guess, early 90s. All of a sudden, we actually couldn't even do sets, because I was an art director at Nickelodeon at the time. We actually couldn't even do sets and repairs the way we used to. You know, if it was a white wall and there was a hole in it, you just put a piece of white tape and no one would ever see it. All of a sudden, high def, you see the white tape. So we had the expense for art department had to go up, because we had to be that much more specific and finer on all of our details. But, you know, with effects and creatures and stuff, it's so much better now with a higher resolution.
Oh yeah, sure. And the other thing was, you know, getting away from 3/4 inch. I worked with Chromacolor in the UK on Take 2. I was right. One of the people that was working with them on that.
Awesome.
And did some interesting things.